Today's show is brought to you by Audible, and right now you can get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/joined-up. There's over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle or MP3 player. Thanks for tuning in to the Joined Up Writing Podcast, a weekly show featuring interviews with fantastic authors sharing their personal stories on how and why they write. There's hints and tips for aspiring writers and great book reviews from top bloggers. Follow us on Twitter at JU Podcast. Right, cue the cheesy theme tune.
Put down your pen and stop your typing. Grab yourself a drink, cause it's Joined Up Writing. The Epilogue.
Yes, it's the Epilogue, our bonus in-between episodes and quick listens containing an extra question or topic not covered in our original interview. And this week I talked to Paul Howarth, author of the excellent debut novel Only Killers and Thieves, about his editing process. And if you missed it, you can find Paul's full interview from last week over at joinedupwriting.co.uk, or even better, subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Overcast, or wherever else you get your podcasts from to get a new episode downloaded automatically every week. We've got a massive archive of interviews, 2-minute tips, epilogues and writing chats for you to enjoy, and it's all completely free. And if you still can't wrap your head around podcast apps, then at the very least just hit the subscribe button over at joinedupwriting.co.uk, and that way you'll get a little email every Tuesday to let you know that the new episode is available and ready to listen to. Okay, let's hear the chat with Paul Howarth. Okay, Paul, thanks for hanging around for the epilogue. And we talked quite a lot about your process and your kind of your false starts, if you like. I think you described them as with your books and different bits and pieces. But I wanted to touch a little bit more about the editing process. You mentioned there your desire to kind of edit to a certain extent as you go along. You do rewrites and things. But when you actually get to the end of the first draft and you've kind of got the first pass of the novel or whatever, if you got like a set way that you approach editing, do you tend to do chapter by chapter, or do you kind of make sure the story hangs together? Talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think I basically just go back to the beginning and start again. To be honest, often there'll be at least one, if not two, kind of full rewrites, which means not just tinkering, but taking a chapter, kind of looking at it and thinking, okay, what happens in this chapter? How do the characters develop? Plot-wise, is there anything that needs to change, etc., etc., and then just rewriting it. Sometimes a paragraph will survive, sometimes a bit of dialogue will survive, but because I now know what that chapter does and how it fits into the whole, because as you say, the first draft, and a fairly heavily kind of perfected first draft is done, then that takes away some of the guesswork, and you can really kind of make that chapter function as tightly and as well as it can. So yeah, I mean, certainly for Only Killers and Thieves, the plot's quite linear, so there's not a lot of jumping around to do. It's not like I'm kind of thinking, how do I
because
connect
it's a journey,
this? How do I connect this particular kind of point from here to chapter 34 down the road? But it's really about slowly and kind of meticulously going back through it and just trying to work out what your book's doing. So first of all, what's the book as a whole trying to do? Then what is this particular chapter trying to do? And then within that chapter, each scene, each character, each chunk of dialogue. And for me, anyway, I don't think that I can take it to the level it needs to be just by tinkering with that. It needs to be, there's the old chapter on one side, here's a new blank page. I'm going to rewrite that chapter word for word. To achieve the same function, probably there might be some slight differences, but it's going to be better, basically.
It's kind of quite a sort of. I mean, I'm going through something similar myself at the moment. I'm editing my novel, and I'm of the same mind, but it's kind of taken me a long time to get there, because part of me thinks, yeah, but this chapter is 2,000 words or whatever it is, and I don't really want to have to write 2,000 completely new words when some of this, I know that some of this works and some of it's okay, but I just tend to find that through bitter experience, it does tend to take longer and doesn't work out as well when I do that. As you say, I'll say, oh, well, I really like that phrase or that paragraph or that bit of description, and by the time I've kind of spent all the time trying to join it with this and shifting things around, I could have just rewritten it and it probably would have had a better flow, because I think you do get that in the kind of the white heat of the first draft, when it's actually working well. I think that's something you do miss sometimes in the edit, is that kind of that flow that you can get into sometimes.
Sure.
And I think if you're not careful, you kind of becomes a lot. You start moving things around on a purely functional basis, and then when you give it some time to breathe and you read it back, you think, actually, this is lost something, hasn't it?
Yeah, but you know what? Like when you come back to that second draft, and you're if you do just try and rewrite the chapter or the scene or whatever it is from scratch, there'll be an awful lot of that free flow DNA still in the stuff that you write again. But you probably by that stage will know your book and your characters and your style an awful lot better than you did first time round, and that's where this kind of heightening and like tightening of the prose can really come out, because you're still covering the same ground and you're probably still doing the same thing that you did in the first draft. You're just hopefully doing it a bit better, with kind of a better idea of what you're about, what the book's about, and what that particular scene's about as well, which would be lost for me anyway if I just tinkered. You'd probably end up with kind of like half of one, and whatever the phrase is.
Half a dozen.
What is it? Half a dozen of one and six of the other.
Yeah, that's it.
And
six and 2 3s is the other one.
Yeah. So yeah, like that's just how I've kind of realized that I work. And also, like I said, I've managed to reconcile myself to the fact that first drafts aren't just a blaze of inspiration. They're just not for me. The way I work is far more methodical. There are still times, and these are the great days where you kind of lose yourself. A couple of hours go by, you don't even realize it, and you've got 1,000, 2,000 words down on the page. But then it will take, again, like a couple of days worth of working that until I'm happy with it to then move on.
Before you move on, it's just how you work. And how much do you think, obviously, especially if you with going through creative writing course and all those kind of things, how much do you tend to think about things like themes, say, for example, throughout the novel? Obviously, that's kind of quite a big picture thing, isn't it? That's like stepping back and seeing the novel as a whole. Is that something you do think about very much, or is it kind of towards the end of the process?
Yeah, I do try and think about it a bit. We mentioned, I think you mentioned earlier, Stephen King with On Writing, and I think I remember him saying something along the lines of, you don't know your themes in the novel, or you shouldn't try and predetermine the themes of the novel until you've written it, or at least until you've done the first draft.
Yeah.
And then the job is to try and kind of tease those themes,
bring them out a little bit,
emerge. Yeah. And I think that's good advice. I mean, if you're writing a book that's about something, then you will have an idea in your mind as to what the themes are. But there might be others that reveal themselves to you either as well or more strongly. So yeah, I think kind of second draft is a really good time to start just elevating those themes and trying to kind of make them a bit more to the fore, because I think that's a danger as well. We can sometimes be a bit too subtle, or think that we know exactly what the theme of that particular section of the story or whatever it is might be. But if you can bring it out and see it as a thing to be developed as well as character, plot, etc., then that's hopefully only to the book's benefit, really.
And do you on that kind of subject, do you have beta readers, or do you have kind of like a trusted reader or readers that see some of your early drafts?
Not really. there's that idea of having a kind of ideal first reader on your shoulder almost when you're working.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really have that. There are friends who I would send a manuscript to. There were a couple of early readers for Only Killers and Thieves, but it's not like a kind of I'm not in any writers group at the minute or any kind of like regular thing. I think it is important if you have somebody who you trust and who you respect and who will respect the task, as it were, of reading and feeding back. But equally, I think it can be a bit dangerous depending on who you send it to, because the wrong kind of feedback can be almost
devastating,
as damaging as the good feedback can be encouraging. So it's if you've got them, fantastic, and I'm lucky. I do have a couple of kind of friends who I would send work to, but it's not essential.
Well, thanks very much. That's given us a nice insight into that part of the process for you. So thanks for hanging around for the epilogue. Really appreciated it. And good luck with the book when it comes out in the UK.
Much.
By the time this comes out, it'll have been out for a week or two. So look forward to seeing how things progress for you.
Brilliant. Thanks very much for having me.
There you go, that was Paul Howarth, and you should definitely check out Only Killers and Thieves, available from Pushkin Press, and you can follow Paul on Twitter at @PaulHowarth_. But how about you guys? Do you have any editing tips you want to share, or maybe you've got a question about editing or redrafting? Let me know on Twitter at JUPodcast, and also don't forget to let me know what you think of the show in general by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts. It takes literally seconds and it helps others to find the show, and it helps me improve the show too. So that's it for this week. Thanks for listening. I'm Wayne Kelly. Happy reading and writing, and I'll see you next time.
Joined up right